Hi, I'm Dirk Rasmussen. I'm the Restoration Program Manager here at Colorado Open Lands. I'm appreciative of everyone joining us today to learn more about the Resilient Landscapes Alliance project. Now, this restoration project is a long-term play for Colorado Open Lands, and we're trying to build off of our previous restoration work and our successes to become a leader in this restoration space. We're practicing innovative restoration at landscape scale. And one of the aspects I'm most excited about for this project, and I've been spending a lot of time thinking about, is what the land means. And I really want to challenge you all to reconsider what the land means. And I think this idea has tremendous potential in this project and to guide our work and our restoration program. Generally, this is what I'm calling the restorative land ethic. And we're going to talk more about that today, but we're just going to scratch the surface. So with that, let's dig into it. So since about 1981, Colorado Open Lands has conserved over 650,000 acres throughout Colorado. And this map on the right shows our target landscapes, and you can see that it encompasses a highly diverse footprint of lands and land uses. And in the traditional sense, this is one way we can measure our conservation success. But we should also think about these dots as communities and families of neighbors. These dots provide homes for our non-human neighbors as well, and these dots are the important wild and working lands that nourish us. However you think about this, COL has a unique portfolio of conservation easements, which creates more opportunity for landscape scale restoration than any other land trust. This extensive network provides tremendous opportunity, but also comes with tremendous responsibility. And as a statewide leader in land conservation, COL has a responsibility to protect resilient landscapes for futures to come. Now, when we talk about conservation and land restoration, it's imperative that we do so with humility and honesty about what conservation challenges we're facing as a community. We have to be upfront with ourselves about the realities of things like biodiversity loss, population pressure, and climate change. And it's imperative that we recognize how these stressors are impacting our communities today, the urgency for collaborative solutions, and understand how we as conservationists can act in the face of tremendous uncertainty. Now, this is the juncture of the presentation where I could show you gloomy pictures, things like emaciated polar bears, catastrophic wildfires, and climate refugees. But we're all aware of these issues, and we're bombarded constantly with the images of trauma to the land and our communities. Personally, I find this narrative debilitating, and it leads to these feelings of ecologic malaise. And I know this is true for many of my peers as well. So we're not going to reopen these images of ongoing trauma today because I'm hopeful. And I'm not hopeful out of naivete, but because I've seen firsthand how resilient the land is, especially when we choose to be active stewards of our homes and communities and practice reciprocity with the land. And by intentionally reframing the landscape as a community of land to which we're part of, a subtle shift in our mindset occurs that allows us to act. By practicing land restoration that puts blame and judgment aside, we become stewards of the land where we live and enter into a reciprocal relationship as community members of the land. So at this point, a very reasonable question may be, okay, Dirk, what is a resilient landscape anyway? And we can think about resiliency taking different forms, such as economic or community resiliency, but also ecologic resiliency. But it boils down to this: resilient lands can withstand change and can continue supporting communities that flourish together through time. And I believe that COL's Resilient Landscapes Alliance is well poised as a catalyst for landscape scale land restoration across Colorado, and really for COL to become a leader in this effort. Now, our working vision statement for the Resilient Landscapes is this: a constellation of restored lands with ecologically vibrant, resilient, and productive lands, and an alliance of landowners and land advocates with the knowledge, resources, and land ethic to steward those lands. And I can't underscore this second part enough. Without an active human partner on the land that's committed to reciprocity, these acts of restoration are really empty exercises. And COL has a tremendous opportunity with this project to more formally build alliances amongst diverse groups and bolster the great work that's already ongoing in many of these communities throughout the state. So in 2017, as a pilot for the Resilient Landscapes Alliance, COL launched the Riparian Reconnect project together with several partners. And the program is a partnership that's quite unique. It's an alliance of scientists, practitioners, conservationists, who are all dedicated to restoring and improving Colorado's headwater riverscapes. And we can think of these areas in kind of a unique way. They only comprise about 2 or 3% of the state's land, but they're homes to more than 75% of Colorado species. So these are really important areas for our state. And if the goal is improving these headwater riverscapes, what are we aiming to do and how do we know? And when many of us think of streams in Colorado, we picture small, clear mountain streams that we can hop right over while crossing a valley bottom. And I want to challenge you for a moment to reimagine what an ecologically healthy riverscape looks like in Colorado. This picture is a great example of what comes to mind for me. It looks messy, it's muddy, it has loads of complexity. They're really kind of a thick jungle of willows in this image that occupies the entire valley bottom. And you can see how the entire valley bottom is dynamic and it's animated by the processes of all the animals that live there. If we accept the land as dynamic, then we also accept that the land has looked differently and functioned differently throughout time. And there are many different ways of understanding this. Now, for me as a geologist, I try to understand Earth's history and share those stories with folks. And to that end, a fundamental tenet of geology is looking to the past to inform the present and future of how systems work. There's many different ways we could do this. For example, we could conduct a field study, collect data and observations, and draw interpretations, share those interpretations with folks. But today we're going to take a quick jaunt over to the archives at the Denver Public Library and have a look around South Park during the late 1800s. Now, there was lots of change happening throughout Colorado and the American West during the 19th century. Valley bottoms in particular throughout Colorado look quite different than they did 150 years ago. And in 1871, the USGS Hayden expedition continued towards South Park, and in their journals they described the area as a vast swamp or bog with a few small lakes, one of which is said to be miles in length. This is a westward view of South Park from Kenosha Pass during the 1880s, and you can see these dark areas in the valley bottoms that are expansive willow complexes. These are wetland systems that occupied the entire valley bottom during this time. And as a side note, COL actually holds easements on several of these lands today. Here's a similar image from Como, taken in 1888. Como's in the northern part of South Park, and again, you can see these expansive dark areas that are willow complexes, wetland systems throughout the valley bottom in South Park. Going further south towards Hartselle, we can see the unrestricted meandering flow of the South Platte River and the broad wetland oxbow complexes that are occupying the valley bottom. You can really see these going all the way into the background of the image. All three of these images really are examples of how different the valley bottoms in South Park looked about 150 years ago. Now, there was widespread conversion of wetlands to other land uses during this period, and this isn't unique to South Park. This was happening all over the American West during this time. So this image here is an example of an early 20th century hayfield that's starting to encroach into the riparian area here. You can see the haying operation on the right-hand side of the image and the stream and wetland system on the left. I really want to be clear here that wetland loss and conversion during this period is happening for a myriad of reasons. Just to name a few: trapping, settlement, railroad construction, mining are all examples of why this land use conversion was happening. A really stark example is from my neck of the woods up near Leadville. This is an image taken in 1939 over Camp Hale of the Eagle River, and these systems form over thousands of years. You can see the meandering flow of the Eagle River here, this really broad wetland system across the valley floor. And if we go just 5 years forward in time, that system is entirely wiped out. It's entirely developed over. And while this was obviously an important operation at the time, given the geopolitical context of the war effort, you can see how rapidly an impact such as changing a use for a military base can disturb thousands of years of geologic evolution. So just one more time, from 1939 to 1944. So our approach to restoring these sorts of systems is called process-based restoration, and it's a strategy that works together with natural processes and systems, and it's highly adaptive. In the context of promoting wetlands and streams, we're really trying to mimic what beavers do on the riverscape. You can think of many of the treatments as constructing beaver starter kits and trying to entice beavers as a partner life form back into the system. So this is a short time-lapse video of our project partners constructing one of these treatments that mimics beaver activity. These process-based treatments often use local materials, they're super low impact and highly cost effective. Now, individual structures like this aren't particularly effective, but when you apply many, say hundreds to a project area, there are tremendous effects to the riverscape that compound and are quite striking. Another part of the Riparian Reconnect program is partnering with other life forms. Now, process-based restoration promotes natural processes with the goal of enticing and supporting other species that cultivate the landscape over the long term. And beavers are a tremendous example of this. They are what we call an umbrella species or functional species, as they create critical habitat for many other animals and life forms that live in those communities. This is a game camera image that was captured at a restoration project in South Park only a few days after completing a project. And one of the primary outcomes we're aiming for is just to slow water down and keep it on the land a little bit longer. So you may be asking yourself, why is keeping water on the land, even for just a few extra days, so important? And these riverscapes, when they're functioning healthily, provide all sorts of benefits to our communities. Some examples of these are improving water quality, storing water more effectively, mitigating the outcomes and risks of natural disasters, storing carbon, and promoting resiliency in both wild and working lands. And keeping water on the land, even for just a bit longer, really yields profound effects for the land in these areas. A local example of landscape resilience is the Westin Pass Fire. And during the summer of 2018, the Westin Pass Fire burned about 13,000 acres throughout western Park County. This image here was taken from a Riparian Reconnect project site adjacent to the fire. County Road 5 runs just at the base of this hill in the middle of the image. And you can see the scorched hills in the distance where the fire burned down to the county road. And as high-intensity fires like this become more and more common, resilient landscapes like this riparian area are buffer zones to active fires that help mitigate post-fire effects. And there's a growing body of knowledge that support this conclusion. These areas are often green ribbons of life after the fires move through the area, and they're critical refugia for numerous species after a fire. Now, beyond Riparian Reconnect, there's tremendous opportunity for COL to expand our restoration effort and help folks practice reciprocity with the land. And in this, I want to acknowledge the great restoration work that other organizations are taking on, and that we're looking to support and partner with the individuals and organizations who share our philosophy. We can't do this work alone. We really need strong partnerships and trust amongst partners. In addition, though, COL is uniquely poised to have a significant impact through the Resilient Landscapes Alliance. It can be a land restoration during the coming decades in this space. This project is one potential solution for conservation challenges that we're facing today and also in the future. And there's tremendous opportunity to be partners with the land and help cultivate landscapes that can withstand change while continuing to flourish. Now, as we continue to build the Resilient Landscapes Alliance project, several core values have emerged as we think through the visioning, and I want to highlight some of those here. We want to challenge folks to reconsider the meaning of land. When we see the land as a community of soil, water, plants, and animals to which we belong, we can love and respect the land and be part of the land. And that shift helps us become caring citizens of the land by practicing reciprocity and using our homes skillfully, frugally, and with affection. As I said earlier, this work requires strong partnerships, and it's imperative that we continue building relationships with landowners and communities. In these relationships, we can frame landscapes that span private and public lands as community assets. And in this work, COL has a strong established track record of collaborating with folks like Trout Unlimited, Ducks Unlimited, the Nature Conservancy, the Forest Service, and BLM, as well as numerous private landowners. We need to prioritize restoration of both wild and working lands as well. In particular, healthy working lands with producers who are committed to regenerative community agriculture have tremendous potential to cultivate thriving agroecosystems. These places are the rangelands, the pastures, the orchards, the gardens that feed and nourish our Colorado communities. We need synergy and reciprocity between wild places and working agroecosystems, and the intersection of these areas is critical to cultivating resilient landscapes. It's in these transition zones where there are diverse and complex ecotones of the land, where there's opportunity for synergy and to build reciprocity. Another value is framing this project as an invitation to practice reciprocity, not a mandate. As we continue this project, we need to do so with a healthy dose of humility and wonder, knowing that we're not in control of the land, but we are in control of how we relate to the land. Land restoration is one expression of reciprocity and often takes beautiful forms in our community. The process of restoration is never quite complete, and thinking of this as a perpetual practice can help us restore ourselves and our communities of land. And this is a concept that's called biocultural restoration, and is summarized in this figure. The triangle is a traditional egocentric worldview where humans are at the top of the pyramid and other organisms are subordinate. But we can shift our mindsets when we think about biocultural restoration. And as we practice land restoration that prioritizes reciprocity, we shift towards an ecocentric mindset where we coexist equally within a complex and rich community of diverse life forms. And in my mind, there's enormous potential in this shift. This philosophy is central to the restorative land ethic, which is the backbone of this project, the Resilient Landscapes Alliance. This is a community-focused effort, and I just can't emphasize this enough. Now, I'd like to end with our vision statement for COL's Resilient Landscapes Alliance, and this image really resonates with me and makes me hopeful. So our working vision is a constellation of restored Colorado landscapes with ecologically vibrant, resilient, and productive lands, and landowners and land advocates with the knowledge, resources, and land ethic to steward them. Now, this doesn't happen overnight, but it takes generations, and that's okay. And when I think about that, I think about my own family. This is a picture of my dad and I taken on the family farm, and it really reminds me of my late Grandpa Rasmussen, who was born in 1921 and would have celebrated his 101st birthday this year. He was a farmer in southern Wisconsin and advocated all his life for local conservation practices. And I'm reminded in this image how much change is possible in just a few generations. And that brings me back to these young ranchers who are the future. This young gal on the right here is maybe 3 years old. And if she lives to be as old as my Grandpa Rasmussen, the year will be about 2100. And there's tremendous hope there. Thinking about that time frame and the scope of change and healing of the land that's possible when we decide to take collective action, I feel incredibly hopeful about the future of this project and conservation. Thank you so much for joining us today to learn more about the Resilient Landscapes Alliance project. If you have questions, feel free to contact us or check out our website at coloradoopenlands.org.